I'm going to call to order the Tuesday, July 16th, 2019 meeting of the Iredell County Board of Commissioners, a pre-agenda meeting. At this time, are there, if you could run through the agenda and any adjustments there too.
We actually, this is probably the first time in several meetings, but we do not have any adjustments to the agenda this meeting.
Well, hallelujah. Does any commissioner have an adjustment? No? Okay, minor miracles. Okay. All righty. We have one appointment before the board this evening, and we'll take care of that at 7 o'clock. And the administrative matters section, this is, by the way, a public hearing meeting, so 7 o'clock we will have the open mic for 3 minutes. Item 8, administrative matters. These are all matters that are appropriate for the consent agenda, and I would ask Ms. Jones to please kick those off.
Thank you, Chairman Mallory. The first item that we have is a request from the Iredell County Economic Development Commission, and Chris Younger is here to make this presentation. And it is a request to grant a 150-day extension in order to fully execute several economic development incentive agreements. And I will say that in your packet, initially the request was going to be for 90 days, but to make sure that all of these could be fully executed, we have amended that request to be 150 days. So that will need to be denoted actually in the spreadsheet in your packet. So instead of the 90 days, if you'll mark through that and add the 150 days.
And that's for all of these individuals?
It's for all of these contracts and projects, and Mr. Younger is here to answer any questions and present this and cover any questions that you may have regarding. They have compiled a list and given you kind of a status update of the projects, and this is just an extension. If you remember, the incentives were approved contingent on 180 days with a signed contract, and they're asking for an extension on those.
All right, Mr. Younger, how are you doing?
Well, good evening. Thank you for allowing us to be here tonight. We do appreciate the opportunity to come in here and get some extensions on some of these outstanding incentive agreements on previous projects that have been started, completed, in process, and the full gamut. There is after reviewing both of our lists, there was one or two things on here. Ms. Manager, I wanted to make sure we had correct. We did have Project Pronto, which is Fiberworks, listed on one page, but not the very back page, which is a summary. I just want to make sure that was also on your list. I believe it is on the one that you had shared with me, that we do have Fiberworks on there.
You said Pronto?
Pronto.
Okay, that's in the middle.
Which is Fiberworks.
Yeah.
Fiberworks.
Okay.
It is shown on yours too as an extension. Okay. And then Project Deacon, which was very global. I believe all those contracts got done on time. We did show an expiration of February of this year. I think they were completed either right before or right after. It was on, there was a second tab on that spreadsheet. It was a summary list. It was on our summary list, but not the front page list. But I think that one was fully executed on time. So if there is a mistake, we may need to come back and discuss that. But I think that was done. I just wanted to point that out. And then we did have, for some reason, on the big sheet, but not the summary sheet, we did have on here Niagara Bottling from, I think, back in 16. But that one also may have been completed and just made it on the sheet by mistake. So those are the only three that we may need to do a little. I'm noticing discrepancy just now on our main detail sheet versus our summary sheet. So we just need to confirm that they were maybe left on the summary sheet by accident.
What they have in their packets, it's the detail sheet.
The detail sheet.
So that's what they have, and that's what they'll be considering for extensions.
I think we should be good
Well,
then.
I don't see anything about Niagara on here.
No, there's nothing on this detail sheet of the Project Deacon or Niagara.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think Niagara was also potentially fully executed, so we will check that out. I don't know why it's on our summary and not our detail sheet, or why that one got overlooked. And then Deacon, I believe we executed that one on time.
Okay. Okay, yeah,
So-
anything that's been executed is not on this detailed sheet.
Okay.
These are just the ones that you're requesting the extension on.
Correct, yeah. So with that, the Iredell County Economic Development, we do request 150-day extensions to fully execute, complete, and get signatures on the incentive agreements for the projects you have listed on your detail sheet there in your packets. If there's any questions about any of those specifically, I'd be happy to answer those for you now.
Does
We
this
do have some notes beside each one.
Does this represent all of the outstanding hanging chads?
Correct, except for the ones I just mentioned that we will need to triple verify. I believe we have a full, complete list right here.
And the 150-day clock starts ticking as soon as we
As soon as you hit that
pass the
gap.
resolution or the motion. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Are companies just having difficulty making decisions? Are they slowing down their process to do these expansions, or what's kind of driving this? Is there a message that we need to be looking at by the fact that that so many of these have to be extended?
Mainly, some of these were internal. Some of them were company-driven. Some were internal when we were doing transitions 3 years ago in our company, and then when we had leadership change a couple years ago, some things got lagged behind, and then the combination of the alignment of Statesville and Mooresville together as one agency got a little bit of this kind of dragged behind also, where we had to pick up some of the ones that were left over when previous personnel had left, and these were not completed. So that's more internal administrative on that side. And then part of that would be that we have now improved our tracking process on incentive and contracts to make sure that everything is getting done when it's supposed to get done in its completeness and fullness. So we did not have a formal tracking process like we do now. Well, we had a tracking process, but it wasn't quite as uniform between the two agencies. Now we're one, and it wasn't as thorough as probably what it should have been as far as communications between the counties and municipalities and the companies and ourselves. So we've since corrected that.
Okay. Well, you answered a question I had about, the fix going forward.
Right. That is the fix going forward. We do have a better tracking system in place. We've coordinated that with Ms. Jones and your staff here quite a bit. And I think we're poised to excel at this point.
Okay. Any additional questions for Mr. Younger? Consent?
Consent.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Mr. Younger. The next item is a request from Mooresville Fire-Rescue for approval to purchase 2 sets of night vision binoculars for use during night water operations and land search functions. And Kent Green is here to make that request.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Mr. Chairman,
How you doing, Kent?
welcome back, Mr. Robertson. Good to have you back. This request is from Mooresville Fire-Rescue to purchase 2 night vision goggle complements out of the rescue reserve account that was allocated in this year's budget. There was some rollover funds available, so that is the total you see here today, $21,984. That is less than the total cost of the equipment, and they will be using internal funds to cover the overage.
I do want to give a shout out to Chief Deaton.
Chief Deaton is here if you have questions as to what this equipment would be used for.
Yeah.
Are there any other Type 1 search and rescue entities?
Charlotte is a Type 1 team, as well as Greensboro.
But Mooresville would be the only one in Iredell County.
Correct.
Any questions for Kent? Consent?
Consent.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And,
Thank you, Mr. Green.
Chief, thanks for a great rescue squad capabilities that you bring to the county.
The next item is a request from the Health Department for approval to sign a multi-year contract with prepaid prepaid health plans.
There you go.
And Jane Henson is here to make that request.
Good afternoon, everyone.
You say that 3 times quickly.
Prepaid health plans, prepaid health plans, prepaid health plans.
She's much better at it than I am.
Been living this for a while.
While saying
Glad to have you back, Commissioner Robertson. In 2015, I think I was before you probably in February of 18 to tell you a little bit about Medicaid managed care and what was coming forward. Well, it is here. And this is a move from fee-for-service to managed care, and it's an integrated model, physical health, behavioral health, and pharmacy. So the contracts were awarded by DHHS in February of this year. There are 4 statewide contracts, AmeriHealth, Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Healthcare, and WellCare, and there's 1 regional contract. That is Carolina Complete Health, and that is for Medicaid Regions 3 and 5, and we happen to be in Medicaid Region 3, which means we'll be working instead of with Division of Medicaid Assistance, we'll be working with 5 contractors or prepaid health plans. So over the last few months, once these contracts came in with us, we've been working closely with our county attorney, reviewing these agreements. And we've also, at her recommendation, entered into a contract with an attorney in Raleigh who has expertise in the healthcare field, because the DHHS RFP was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages long. So we needed to make sure that we were protected as public health, and we got everything that's in the DHHS agreement that we're supposed to get. So the go-live date is November of 2019 for Regions 2 and 4. Our go-live date is February 2020, but these prepaid health plans have already reached out to us and wanted contracts signed yesterday. And what we are not going to do is to rush and sign something that doesn't get us what we need, because once it's signed, then this is what we're bound by. So we've taken our time. Lisa's helped us tremendously. We have a call with the healthcare attorney on Friday, and then we'll be ready to push them back out to these 5. We're beginning the negotiation phase. What we don't know at this point is how much negotiation there's going to be, but we're certainly going to try. All of these agreements are automatic renewals. I think United Healthcare is looking for a 3-year agreement with automatic renewal. The others are 1-year agreements. And in some ways, it protects us. Our case management programs that you'll hear Jessica speak about, that is one thing that we've been very protective of, and DHHS has only given us 3 years to prove ourselves, and then it's released and we're not sure what will happen. So we really want agreements, because these are very important programs and services that public health has offered, and we want them to stay with public health and not go to 5 entities. So we're here before you this evening to ask for approval to be able to sign these agreements. Lisa and I did not think that you really wanted bedtime reading that was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages even combined. So we'll trust the expertise of our attorney, and that she is helping us make sure that we are trying to get the best agreements that we can. But you have to understand, in the DHHS RFP, they have to reach out to public health. They have to ask us for agreements. We're identified as essential providers. They don't have to have agreements. So we will work hard to be able to get what we need. Now, they have to reimburse us at 100% of the Medicaid rate. It's just the other wraparound services that we want to continue to provide: postpartum newborn home visits, family planning, our maternal health clinic. We don't offer primary care, and we don't need to, because there's hundreds of providers in the county. So and we have an FQHC here providing services. So I'll be glad to entertain. Or
what kind of indication have you gotten from the different providers as to their willingness to make adjustments to or modify their sort of standard contract? And if we're just out there alone, we don't have a lot of bargaining power. But are there some like counties, for instance, in terms of you're saying that there was a difference in what our needs were? We don't need primary physicians. We have plenty of those. Are there some other counties that we can buddy up with to see if we can't get more leverage in terms of this negotiating?
I think that, one, we're certainly not alone, and I would say that the biggest issue with the contracts in their current form is I don't think that any of them, and correct me if I'm wrong, not a one was written for a local health department. They were written as though we were primary care providers. And so there are significant changes that need to be made, not only for the services that we provide, but just not considering that they were dealing with a local government entity. So there's some groundwork that needs to be laid there, and the healthcare attorney that we're utilizing is also helping those same other counties. And so there is some negotiating power there, and I suspect that most of the requests for changes will be very similar for all of us.
Is DHHS engaged and willing to take a position advocating for those changes on behalf of the health departments they oversee?
Part of them, and maybe only one of them, actually, one or two of them referenced specific requirements of the RFP from DHHS and how they were addressing those things. And so DHS has kind of come at it from the standpoint of the RFP, and these are the things that those providers are required to do. And then it's a matter of making sure that contract actually meets and has those requirements met. So I suspect that just from the interaction so far, there's one that's going to be a little bit harder, one or two that are going to be a little bit harder than the others, just based on size and the position that they've taken. Like, if you don't turn this around tomorrow, then we're not going to, you may not be on our list, sort of thing. But I think that with the attorney that's assisting us, and then just the process and the time that we have, I think our negotiating position is a good one. And just to make it clear, none of these obligate any funds for the county. They're services, but the reason that we brought it to you is because of that multi-year trigger that Jane or Beth doesn't have the authority to sign.
Yeah, I know I'm late to the party, but that was my concern. And in my previous time on this board, there were two instances where contracts, you had to really dig through. They were really, really, really long, or studies. One was the relicensing when Duke Power had the federal government requires the utilities to go through a long process to get licensing to operate the dams. And it was, if I remember right, it was 3 big notebooks full. It was a lot to read through, but there were a couple of provisions in there you go, whoa. They say, it won't cost you anything, but, on page 397, paragraph 2, that's kind of not what that really says. And the thing is once you sign it, everybody gets amnesia. And then the other was the CRTPO, the contract for I-77. Again, that's super, super long, and we've read it, and it's good, and blah, 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 and then all of a sudden you start digging into the details. And, yeah, they said it didn't cost any money, but you've got in between all the hithertos and witherfores in the legal agreement, all of a sudden folks are on the hook for some money. So if you're saying it's a long contract and that we're not on the hook,
I think it's been tremendously beneficial and for us to reach out to a healthcare attorney, because Lisa has done an excellent job of helping us review this from a legal perspective. Internally, we have taken everything DPH has given us that was in the RFP and tried to make sure that language was in there. But having the attorney that happened, he spoke at our legal conference in April. Many other health departments have engaged him because I do believe DHHS tried to be protective of local public health, because what you don't want is health departments that have based a tremendous amount of their revenue on Medicaid to overnight lose all of that revenue. Right. And when you come see us, we look at the whole person. We've always delivered care in that manner. If you're homeless, if you're hungry, we are going to try to take care of those needs. Well, this is a new model now for other providers that are signing on to be under the Medicaid managed care umbrella with specific deliverables. So there's been many different sets of eyes looking at it from different perspectives. I think...
Well, from a policy perspective, what I need help understanding is based on the 5 different companies that have said that they'll provide coverage in this area, and you would be one of the providing agencies seeking reimbursement from them, if they're just saying, hey, you take it or we're not going to play in your space, well, that's sort of them cutting their nose off to spite their face, because, we don't need to be signing up for a contract that disadvantages you or any of our other constituent private providers. So, this sort of our way or the highway, they may find themselves on the highway. We've got 5 to choose from. There's some counties that maybe they only have 1 or 2.
That's right. There are 85 health departments because they're regional health departments. And we actually early on had to ask for an extension because when these contracts came out, maybe March, many health departments were told if you don't sign it within a couple of weeks, you won't be in our network. And we said, wait, you need to slow down for us. We're local government. We have a process that we have to go through, and we cannot do that. That's just unacceptable. And they all were amenable to that. And we just don't know, once we give the red line agreements back to them, how much compromise there'll be.
The last time a legislative body passed a health care plan or health care legislation before they read it was Obamacare. So, we need to be eyes wide open in this. Appreciate all of your efforts in that regard and engaging the folks that do this on a daily basis. I know that would be a daunting task for you to have to be wading through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds.
Surprised you haven't quit over it, actually.
I don't think it should. I think we're still friends, Lisa, but it truly, and this is the world we live in, and it is just, it's just so much. And then comparing, and did we miss something? So that feedback from our attorney that we've worked with has been extremely helpful to just make sure that we have all of our services covered. It matches what's in the RFP.
Any further questions,
I think
comments?
we've covered it. We've covered it. Only in government can it be this complicated.
Thank
consent?
Consent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. The next item is a request from the Health Department for approval of Budget Amendment Number 2 in the amount of $155,229 to pay back excess reserve funds for care coordination for children and obstetric care management programs, and Jessica Ridgway is here.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So, like Jane just discussed, we, as the Iredell County Health Department, are included in care management programs. That is care coordination for children, CC4C, and pregnancy care management, or OBCM, as you'll see on here. Those programs are, we receive revenue from those programs as a per member per month revenue that's received monthly. And every 6 months, we have to complete a semi-annual expenditure report. So that's done twice a year. And in our contract with CCNC, which is Community Care Network of North Carolina, they pay us for these care management programs. In this contract, it states that we are only allowed to keep a 3-month reserve balance in our reserve funding. And we got an invoice recently, within the last few weeks, that we have to pay back the excess funding that we have in our reserve balance. And that is what I'm coming to you today for, is to request a budget amendment to pay back those fundings. It's $155,299. And so this is in our contract that we have to pay it back. And this is as of June of 2018. So they haven't done this past year yet. These reserve fundings and the monies you see here are just as of June of 2018.
So there are the initial amounts based on some analysis of your projected demand for these services, and the demand for the services has been less than anticipated.
So the way that they calculate the 3-month, what we should have in our reserve fund for 3 months is based on 25% of our total true revenue for these programs. So they just take 25%, and that's how much we should have in these programs. And the payback amount here is the lesser.
So if there was some change in terms of demand, in the next couple of months, that, because you've given a certain amount back, and now it looks like you're going to be short because the demand was greater at a particular time of the year than another time of the year,
Yep.
Are you able to claw some of this back contractually?
No. So once we give it back to them, it's given back. But when I do those semi-annual reports, I report how much revenue we got versus our expenditures. And if the expenditures are over the revenue, then there won't be any excess for those months. But this is just from June of 2018, and I've looked back at our records. They have not requested excess back from us in several years. We think, it's not been confirmed, but because of Medicaid transformation, we think CCNC is trying to get their money back because they will no longer be paying us. It will be these prepaid health plans that pay us for care management, not them. So we think they're trying to just get their money back. And yeah.
The underlying agenda.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Consent?
Consent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The next item is a request from Planning and Development, and Matthew Todd is here to make this request, and it is for consideration to call for a public hearing on August the 6th, 2019, in regard to text amendments to the Land Development Code.
Good afternoon, Matthew.
Good evening. This first request has to do with the text amendment that we've been working on, and I'll say this one is somewhat driven by that industry. We start hearing some interest or some concerns related, and when we looked into it, we felt the need to come up with a text amendment. Planning Board did vote 8-0 to recommend this text amendment. Essentially, it has to do with stump dumps, referred to as LCIDs. Those are areas in the county where they're hauling in products from other sites. We've got those now. They're allowed with a special use permit. What we start hearing is people want to start taking those products and either burning it or grinding it. We already have some of the grinders in the county at these sites, but they've been treated as a sawmill, as a stretch. So as we're trying to address this, we're trying to address a couple things. The state also regulates the air burners from an air quality standpoint. We're just wanting to allow it to be part of their request that would go before the Board of Adjustment. It's the term a lot of times these days is source reduction. They're running out of places to put some of this material. I also point out these changes are basically to regulate someone that's running this as a business. If you own or developing a subdivision or a commercial property in the south end and you're doing this on that site for the products on that site, you don't fall into this category. But if you're taking your product somewhere else and you're that business that's receiving it, that's when you're going to fall into these requirements. So again, it's looking at the existing stump dump facilities and allowing them to do something with that product, and then also coming up with a source reduction facility. The other thing we're hearing a lot about is people wanting to take concrete block, asphalt, any type of those substance, and grind that up, basically, and have a product that they can resell rather than just filling in a hole and covering it up. Again, this is already happening at demolition sites. This is not to regulate that. This is to regulate somebody that's doing it as a business where it's being hauled to them for processing.
I think one of the primary complaints that we get is, I think, related to this subparagraph C, which deals with access and minimizing sediment on adjacent roads. We get a lot of calls and pictures of mud that's caking a lot of those access roads. What's the enforcement mechanism for that? Because it says to minimize sediment. Well, how's that defined? And
In that section, we actually just put that section in the last 2 years. Before then, we didn't have anything in the code that addressed it. So as you're looking at this, it's just the stuff in red is the new stuff. The stuff that's in black text is existing. But that section, again, was added 2 years ago to address the concerns that you just mentioned. These facilities, like any development in the South End, they're going to track stuff out on the road. So yes, the verbiage minimal track out, I mean, that is somewhat subjective, but you're going to have track out from these facilities. So again, it's just trying to, what happens is when it does happen, it needs to be cleaned up immediately. And that's what we look for with these sites.
It's hard to clean it up. They can wash it off, and the problem is if you're down, if you're where the wash flows, that's where the rub gets.
Well, we don't like to see people wash it off necessarily, because then you create a bigger mess sometimes. So yeah, we'd rather them just try to sweep it off to where, yes, it's going to stay stained looking, but at least there's not chunks on the road. You wash it off, now you've got mud in the road that you're dealing with. So.
How will this change existing stump dumps? For instance, Barfield Road that we've had a lot of issues with.
Yeah, any existing sites that have been permitted, if they want to add the, Barfield does have the approval to do the grinding of products, but if they want to add an air burner, the air current burner, they would have to come back through the process. And that'd be going back to the Board of Adjustment, another public hearing to add an air burner.
Is this the right mechanism? Have we looked at, you and I have talked about it before, like the permit Barfield Road got years ago had no expiration date on it. It was said verbally, I think, when it was approved, it was approximately going to be a year. That's probably, 12 or 13 years now.
Mm-hmm.
Do we need to put something in our text amendment for permitting and things like that has an expiration date where the board or the planning board both have to reapprove it? I mean, would you recommend that? You're the one who has to deal with it, other than us getting the calls we get, and then we call you.
Well, and I think that's where, based on these text amendments, you're seeing a change in this industry. I don't think they're going to be, you'll still see some that buy a property with a gully on it and fill it in. But more often than not, I think you're going to start seeing people buying properties that are near where the development's taking place. They're going to be processing it somehow, either with the chipping or the burning, reselling whatever product they end up coming up with afterwards. And then as that development transitions throughout the county, they'll close that site and move with the development.
So, for instance, you've got a site that you said that it's legal to grind and take care of the product on their own property.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So are you going to see, is there an issue with buying the property across the street because it's a big gully and you're going to fill it in? As long as they own both? Does it matter that they cross the road, or does it have to be the same parcel? I'm saying, have you thought about that?
If it's tied in with that development, I mean, if it's across
Got
the
to be in
road,
the same development or the same parcel per se, or the other one we talked about.
I think it could cross the road. I mean, if you're doing a subdivision and it happens to cross the road and it's all the same development that's being proposed, I mean, we would interpret that to be that you're processing what's coming from that development.
Because we dealt with something while you were gone. We're dealing with is it's legal to process materials from their own property, but the complaint apparently was that materials were coming in from off the property onto that property to be processed. Correct?
Correct.
So does this address anything similar to that? And has our definitions been tightened up to make sure the defined sawmills are really sawmills? Or I'm trying to make sure we're getting you the policies and mechanisms in place to oversight for these things.
Yeah, I think we have with this. I mean, we have what's needed to be able to enforce and allow, again, that source reduction. It seems to be, I mean, the state now is recognizing that it's a need. So, I'd say we're stepping forward on that, and then it would allow us to address those requests that are out there. But again, an existing site that already came through the process last year or 10 years ago, if they want to change theirs to have the grinding or the air current burner, they've got to come back through that process and with the special use permit. And honestly, those are getting harder and harder to get through the approval
But
process.
does the special use permits have expiration dates on them, or once you get them, they're there? Is there a need to
No
that's what I'm saying. I mean,
expiration.
would that not be reasonable to have an expiration date on there for a situation such as Barfield Road that's been a headache to all of us for years?
I think every request, they're so broad on the size, it would be hard to come up with a time frame and the legal aspects.
Yeah. I'm not aware of special use or conditional use permits having a time on them. They attach to the property. They're part of the zoning. I'd have to research whether or not that's not permissible. I could see that it's because it's not a permit in the true sense of a permit. It's not like for an event or something like that.
Right.
But typically, once you have it, it attaches and it stays. Now, whether or not you made it as a condition on that special use permit that the use terminates or expires by such and such date, and the applicant agreed to that, then there wouldn't be an issue with it, I suspect. I'd want to double check that before I gave you a firm answer, but I think it would all be in how it was done. I don't know that I would be comfortable with it being in the ordinance that this is only permitted for a year. You certainly could work in something that required certain things to be submitted after a year or on a renewal process. If the
Could you have a review process to ensure that its operation has been in conformity with?
right, like an inspection, which is
Right.
similar to what you all did with the stormwater issue with the zoning.
And if it's been a problem child and has always, been a headache, and then withdraw the zoning.
Right now, the only way a special use can expire, it goes on to infinity until that company ceases to continue that act there, correct?
Or they come back for something else.
And again, I'll point out the changes we made a couple of years ago. They've helped. Have they solved the problem? I don't think we can solve the problem completely. There's always going to be that small percentage that causes a problem, no matter what we're talking about in the zoning ordinance.
That's why I was trying to use a specific example we've dealt with,
Yeah.
and you've had to deal with too, to see if there was something we could help you with moving forward. I don't know.
Could you explore, to give us some recourse to those small minority of operators that just either go right up to the line or over the line, then back over the line, back and forth, creating issues that's impacting their neighbors and impacting people that use the roads. That we can review that and withdraw this, not to have an expiration, but to have a periodic review by staff, and then if there's a problem, after notice and an ability to address those issues, that it can come before us and we can withdraw it.
Well, if you're talking about existing,
No, I'm talking about future.
okay.
How about that incinerator thing that you're talking about, where they burn the stuff on site, or that's for, they're running a business where dump trucks are coming in, bringing the debris in, and they're burning it. Isn't there didn't the state just approve some kind of concrete structure to do that in?
There's a couple ways those are. Some of them are in the ground, and some of them are basically shipping containers. You do have to have a license to operate one of those, and not only that, whoever has a license has to be on site the whole time the thing's in operation. And as I mentioned, yes, the state does have their own set of permits for
Like
those.
a construction cremator, so to speak.
Yes.
It's an apparatus. It's a structure. They sell them, that you buy the thing. That's what you do. You burn stumps and debris inside that structure.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to use a term that is familiar to you, which I guess is commander's intent. I think it's in everybody's best interest to reduce, recycle, and reuse. And anything that we can do to keep people from driving those trucks to our solid waste facility is a good thing, okay? Because we don't ever want to be alive when another one has to be cited, okay? So okay, we agree that it's really good if we can recycle or reuse some of the stuff. Really, when you get down to it, there's kind of two issues that people have with it. Smoke and sound. Wood smoke, despite all the tree huggers, wood smoke typically burns fairly clean. It's not an offensive smell. The difference is, or I think kind of where we cross the line on smoke are in two areas. If they're building a subdivision and they do the clearing and they're going to do some burning and there's going to be some smoke and it's going to last for a couple of months, that's a very different discussion with disgruntled neighbors than it is you're going to smell this smoke every day for the rest of the time that you live here, okay? So I think if I understood the temporary and the 1 year, and that's really kind of where we're going there. If you're building a 400-house subdivision and you're doing this for the subdivision, it's a lot easier for us to tell the neighbors, hey, this is only going to be for 2 more months, as opposed to, it's Junior's
Infinity and beyond
business, and you're going to smell that for the rest of your life. The other thing the other question I have, and I'm going to, my memory fails me, but I know that there were parts in the southern part of the county where the air quality and your economic incentives that you could get from the state in certain areas where the air quality was at risk. I can't remember the classification or the name for it. I just want to make sure that if we permit or we allow one of these near those areas or somewhere, that's not going to turn around and bite us, because they're going to say, well, you got 3 of these and they're in an area that's this big, and by definition that puts you in this exclusion zone where the state won't give any help do any incentive program for a business that's located in that area. Again, I don't remember the details. I'm sorry.
I think you're referring to the attainment and non-attainment areas.
Attainment, that's it. I'm sorry. Thank you for remembering that. So have we looked into that at all, if there's any sort of connect the dots?
No, but we certainly can. I'm familiar with what you're talking about.
I think that would be a good thing to do. The next one, so smoke and sound. So on sound, on the burner, maybe not too much. On the grinder, much. Okay, but again, hey, I know it's loud. I know it's noisy. Yeah, I know your chickens don't lay eggs and your husband can't sleep and the baby wakes up. It's one thing to say live with it for 3 months. It's another thing to say live with this for the rest of your life. So, and I know when it comes to noise, we have debated whether or not to set decibel limits. And then the problem is then if you're going to do that, are you going to have decibel cops?
Enforcement.
Yeah, the enforcement becomes horrendous. So the way to deal with that is by setback. Okay, so like under use separation, it says all crushing, grinding, and burning shall have a 500-foot minimum separation from any existing residence. Okay, so then what happens when Skinny McGillicuddy comes in and a resident moves in? Now all of a sudden that operation is now 250 feet. Does the existing does the person that we permitted, is that his get out of jail card, or does the person who builds the new house, do they get the tough luck card? You knew this when you moved in. So you know, I don't know if, what controls that.
Would that be something that would be uprooted during the permitting process for a new home? That, hey, buddy, you got to realize you're within.
You'd have to disclose that, you know.
No, not necessarily. I mean,
So it's caveat emptor, buyer beware.
Yep.
yeah.
The other part of this that I was a little concerned about is on B, use separation, point 2. There shall be 100-foot minimum separation from all perennial streams. You know, one of the reasons that we did the erosion control ordinances, and I remember reading this study that we got from Central Iowa Council of Government back during the throes of the economic crisis, and that said that future economic development is going to be dictated by two things: by the availability of labor, or the standard of quality of life issues that would make people would be willing to relocate to come. So, and of course, at the time, unemployment was 10%, and it was hard to even imagine that. But that turned out to be true. As the boomers retired, there's actually a labor shortage. The other thing was access to water. And there are places in California, right, and out west, where they can have all the economic incentives they want, but they can't build a plant because either the plant can't have access to more water, or if they build 200 homes for the workers, that none of the homes can get permitted to have water. So we're really in a good spot to have water, but we can't screw it up. Okay? And the biggest pollutant in the Catawba River or any of these watersheds isn't some chemical pollution, it's sediment. And so it says 100 feet, but when I think of people bringing in stumps, and those stumps aren't clean, you know, they're going to be loaded with residue a lot. I'm not saying that what we have written down is wrong. I'm just saying I have a little concern that 100 feet, does that meet our intent, which is to keep the runoff that has sediment out of those streams, because that might not be key for us in the next 2 years, but I promise in the next 20 years that's going to be paramount. So that was it. And then when you said the dust, my thing is all areas shall be maintained in a manner which prevents dust. And it's really not just dust, but the dirt that gets carried onto the road from adversely impacting adjacent properties. Now, I mean, this is, you know, getting into defining pornography. I can't define it, but I know what it looks like. So adversely impacting some people, if there's a little dust cloud, you know, for 15 minutes once a day, that's bad, okay? And other people think that's not bad. So I guess it's okay just to leave it real generic, and then who makes that call? Who says yes? You are now not in non-compliance because it's adverse.
Yeah, well,
I don't want to do
that. That goes back to enforcement.
Right.
You know, one of the things when you're looking at a setback, you have 100-foot distance from any adjacent residentially zoned properties for all activity areas, and 200 feet for grinding, crushing, and block and stone gravel. And if you'll note on 3, it should be minimum. It says minimum. Well, you know, if you have a piece of property adjacent to this property, and you're going to develop that for residential use, and it's zoned for that, then if you're only 100 feet away from that, then you've just technically eaten into this 500-foot minimum separation from the crushing, grinding, and burning in use separation. You've really forced the neighbor to be 500 feet away from that activity, to have a 400-foot dead zone for any residences. Presumably, you've chosen that 500-foot separation from a residence for a reason. And so when you look across and the impact on your neighbor's ability to develop far enough away from that activity, you've just had it taken really a good bit of their land. Does that make sense?
It does, but if it's not existing, I mean, they could build up to the line, the normal setback.
They can build up to the line. The problem is, from a practical quality of life perspective, you know, if what we're saying is, you know, really you want to be 500 feet away from a residence. Well, if the residence doesn't exist yet, you've basically said, well, if your neighbor's going to develop on that property, you've basically taken 400 feet away from them, because they're going to be a good deal closer, getting maximum use of that property, but those homes are going to be in a disadvantaged position. So I'm wondering if these setbacks ought not all be based on where the line is. You know, don't worry about existing residences so much as it should be from the property line.
I think that's an older philosophy. It shows up in the code a lot under different uses, and the idea of going to, you know, you've got your minimum from your property line, but then it's also trying to take into consideration those existing houses. And I mean, I'll say throwing them a bone, with the understanding that the next guy can choose a little bit. Now, if his lot's not big enough, yes, maybe he can't choose to push it far enough, but it's trying to balance the existing versus a new proposed, and giving that existing one just a little extra cushion than if there's not a house sitting there. You know, when you start, and we looked at greater setbacks, and I didn't bring the images, but you talk about, you know, the flip side of it, the one that's wanting to do this use. 200-foot setback from the property line starts taking a lot of land. You know, you up it to 500 from a property line. I mean, you've basically, it's no longer an affordable business to buy that much land. And, you know, if to us, you know, we just tried to match it. I mean, I think some of our rock quarries don't have much greater setbacks than these. This is very similar in the sense that it's crushing. But it's just trying to balance, you know, the reality of what we're faced with.
Mr. Todd, if we choose to make a change in this document, does it go back to planning board?
Not necessarily, no.
So this pretty much takes it from here and moves forward.
Yes.
I was going to wrap up. Go ahead.
So basically, the reason you're doing this, is it complaint driven? Is it just what did you look at resource wise to come up with your recommendations? Have you looked at other counties' text amendments in pertaining to this situation? I'm just trying to look at the comments we made. We haven't had a public hearing yet. Okay, so we've got 500-foot minimum separation from existing residents. Somebody comes in later. I don't know what the options would be beyond that. You know, I understand you're saying as far as land, how much you would have to have. So I guess my question is, have you compared or looked at people with similar text amendments, and what does theirs say? Is this consistent with it, or have you had the opportunity to do that? I would just be curious to know what they do in some of the other counties.
Well, specifically for the air curtain burners, that's I'll say a relatively new technology. So no, other jurisdictions have not addressed them yet. And we've known about them for a couple years. Haven't had anyone specifically wanting to do. Where now we do. So that's kind of tripped us. It's not complaint driven. It's more
Proactive.
trying to be able to address somebody that's coming into our office they're wanting to do this, so we're going through the process in order to come up with the guidelines that they need to fall under. And yeah, in doing our research and drafting it, we looked at existing things in the code. As I mentioned, sawmills, that 500-foot setback, that's where that came from. Similar use in the sense that it's going to be a noisy use. We also look at the state regulations where they're already, from the air quality permit, first of all, those air current burners, they're not really supposed to have smoke. If they're smoking, they're not operating the way they're supposed to work. And that's where my understanding is if they're smoking, you call the state, they'll come out there and do their inspection to make sure that it is operating the way it's supposed to. Again, they are operating in the county already, just not in this fashion, more on an individual basis. So we've looked at it.
I'm going to tell you, I'll take a little bit of issue with you because when I lived on Lake Norman, they were building condos across the way, and they just stripped everything, every blade of grass, every tree, everything. Put up a little old tiny silt fence, and of course, when you get those thunderstorms where it rains 2 inches in an hour. I mean, it washed 4-foot gullies. You called department, and you called Diener to ask them to come out and look, and they give you a song and dance about they can get out there in 6 months. Our cove had been dredged. It was 6, 8 feet deep everywhere, and by the time I left, you could wade across it. So, yeah, we can depend upon the state, but what we don't want to do is put our citizens in a position to where we have a bunch of rules and nobody can enforce it. If I could, let me wrap. Let's see if we can't wrap this thing up. First of all, is thank you, Mr. Todd. This is actually a very good thing to do, and I would say that I'll preface my comments with the reiteration that the intent of the board is to encourage the builders and the development community to reduce, reuse, recycle, and reuse, and these types of businesses do exactly that. And what we should be doing is stuff that helps them without causing a lot of unnecessary angst amongst adjacent property owners. So the intent is good. I would say that there were probably 4 general issues that need to be probably vetted out a little bit more before I think I'd be willing to vote yay or nay on anything. Number 1 is the attainment question. I feel sure that it probably isn't a function, but I sure would like to know it before I vote on it. I'd hate to find out afterwards. Number 2 is on the erosion question. Does our erosion control ordinance, as it's written, take care of my concern with with B section 2 on how close they are to streams? If that takes care of it, we don't need to be redundant. Okay.
Could I get clarification? Because those are 2 separate things. Erosion control, as you're familiar with, based on the area that they're grading, that's when all the measures are going to be required. Once it's stabilized, those measures technically can disappear. So erosion control would no longer play in to a stabilized site.
And this is a business. This is a business. Again, if it's permanent, yeah, they're bringing stumps, but they're bringing stumps with dirt. Mm-hmm. What's the material balance on that property? Okay, and what we don't want is any of it going into the stream. I think as it's written right now, I feel like we're exposed unless you tell me different. The third thing is I think the way we word it and the way we approach it should be very different. If this is temporary for a particular project, or is this, I would say, permanent, meaning that it's meant to be a long-term commercial operation. I think how we approach it should be very, very different. We should be much more lenient if it's something temporary,
I agree.
And we should be much more stringent if it's going to be a permanent business. And then the last of my four is the word adversely impacting. Just want to know what's the mechanism for defining that, because we're all going to choke on those words, I promise you, before this is over. So if we can just send it back with those, my motion would be that we as a board state that this is positive. We should be trying to accommodate the people trying to do these things, but we've got these four areas that cause us some degree of concern, and we'd like to explore it just a little bit more before we vote on any sort of text. Is that guidance okay with you, Ms. Jones?
It is. So does the board want to send this back to the planning board to look at those four areas before calling for a public hearing?
And I think that's what we're asking.
Is that appropriate?
They need to answer those questions. I think those were well phrased, and how much time do you think would be required?
Well, planning board's not going to meet till September, so I mean we can put it on their September agenda. Of course, that pushes it to October to get it back, which is plenty. I mean, that's more than enough time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, most new subdivisions aren't going to be launched and cleared.
Again, if I go ahead and answer the third question,
sure.
It is drastically different. Temporary, you don't come talk to us at all. Permanent, you come apply. Special use permit, you got to make a hell of a case with the Board of Adjustment. As Lisa's familiar with, that's not going to be easy for this, because this is going to draw the neighbors out. I don't even know if it could get approved, honestly. So it is a great big difference between how the two would be treated. Not sure how much more we could separate them, honestly.
Okay. Or at least a statement to that effect so that it's apparent to someone, because people hear what they want to hear. Oh yeah, I don't need any permits. There needs to be a. You got to define it, because otherwise it's, hey man, I heard it was on farmland. I don't have to have a permit. I was doing it for a subdivision. I don't have to do a permit. Yeah, I know, but you're doing it for everybody's subdivision, so you do have to have a permit. Well, I'm just doing it for one more subdivision. I'm telling you, I've been down this road.
Is that something to go back to the planning board with, or should we try to handle it at our level?
I mean, they're going to recommend the wording.
Well, I mean, you've got two options.
Yes. Over it, and then and the planning board, because it's a change to what they sent to us. I think it needs to go back to the planning board for their review and subsequent vote, and then it can come back to us, and then we can call a public hearing at that time.
Just one point of clarification: is there still a desire to add the exploration of putting in an option for inspection, a review or inspection process that was discussed earlier?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'd like
a compliance inspection.
Yeah, I apologize. I should have included that.
We discussed that. Yeah.
Okay.
You can share the correct legalese.
So do I have to amend my motion to include the provision?
Well, I don't think it's.
Or do we not need a motion?
I don't think we need a motion.
Okay.
We're
right.
we've articulated what our concerns are. And between now and then, as staff develops this, feel free to communicate or bring back to us and say, this is what we're thinking about. What does that address your concerns? Before you even go through a formal process of adoption by the planning board, because, if we can give you hey, this is the 90% solution, then we have a warm and fuzzy, you can move forward. We don't have to go back and forth like a ping pong ball.
Okay.
So
We just will remove this from the consent agenda.
We just need to do this by consensus to send it back to the planning board and
Yes.
staff.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So is there consent to do that? Consent. All right.
Okay, the next item is also Mr. Todd's item, and it is a request to call for a public hearing in regard to a request by Jimmy McKnight to release zoning and subdivision jurisdiction to the town of Mooresville.
Before we get started, is Mooresville still holding all their ETJs to do once a year?
Yeah.
Twice a year now.
We've been negotiating that intently. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
It's officially twice a year now.
We are in negotiations with them. They have a big ask, and we have asked them to pare that ask back down to a couple specific areas, and we're still working on those specific areas.
Okay, yeah, the distinction is, the private requests to be incorporated into their ETJ, which has gone from 1 year, their review just once a year, to now they're reviewing it every 6 months. What Vice Chairman Bowles is talking about is the town of Mooresville's request, the municipal ask for ETJ release. And so they came to us with a rather large north, south, east, and west program, and we've been through some discussions as that's been narrowed in its scope and more focused. So,
but this before us tonight would be considered a personal or a landowner ask.
Okay. Yeah. But before we had been a bit hesitant because we were the ones catching all the arrows from the residents, and then by the time it got to them, they said, well, it's a done deal. So we were doing all the dirty work.
And pretty much landowners and developers don't ask for that property to be released unless they've got some kind of development plan for it.
Right.
So,
Okay.
and to be able to get utility, actually to be able to get Mooresville to even look at their plan, it has to be released.
Right. Okay. Sorry.
okay.
It's all right. So yes, this one is 33.85 acres that's being requested. They have filled out their paperwork for voluntary annexation for December with the town of Mooresville. It's a proposed single-family residential development. Again, preliminary site plan showing about 80 homes, but that could increase or decrease based on whatever Mooresville ended up approving. And this is just for the call for the public hearing, so it's not been, signs have not been put up yet, it's not been advertised. And it does fall within that first area that we've kind of been identified to talk with Mooresville about.
Are there any questions for Mr. Todd? Consent?
Consent.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Todd also has the next one as well, and this is a request from Planning and Development for approval of a contract related to the 2018 Single Family Rehabilitation Loan Pool Program.
We were awarded this grant early last year, possibly the end of November of 17, roughly. But the administrator we were going to use for the grant at the last minute told us they were getting out of the business of administering housing grants. That left us in a bit of a bind. It's taken over a year to find an administrator with the experience to be able to step in and administer the grant. Of course, we talked with Council of Governments, found out Central Carolina Council of Governments wanted an additional amount on top of what the state already pays to administer the grant. It didn't seem acceptable to us. We explored our options, and thanks to Beth, we were able to get approval to go with the Western Piedmont Council of Governments, who agreed to do it basically at the cost the state pays. They did not want any additional fees from the county. Because the COGs have a non-compete clause, Central Carolina had to release us to be able to be serviced by Western Piedmont COG. So this is just a contract to finally move forward with this grant.
And if our old grant administrator had been in business, we would have used them, and this wouldn't even be on our desk right now, correct?
Correct.
We're not a member of the Western Piedmont,
We are not.
and so that wasn't available in the...
That's why we had to be released from our current COG that we were a member of to receive services from another COG. It's an agreement that all of our council of governments have one council of government does not serve a non-member agency unless their member agency releases them. So our desire was to get turnkey contract management for the price that is allocated for contract management.
Right.
So that was what our goal and intent was. This is a vital service we want to provide to our residents, but it is truly a pass-through of grant funds, and we did not feel that it was appropriate to spend additional taxpayer dollars paying for grant administration when there was another council of governments that could do it turnkey for the contracted price, which is why
So Central Iowa Council of Governments just weren't able to.
they were able to do it. It would not be a complete turnkey process, and they were asking for an additional amount of money in order to do that. And we went back and forth, and they finally agreed to release us to allow us to have that service provided by the Western Piedmont Council.
Good job.
Because if we did that, we would be spending taxpayer dollars
Yeah.
on that additional fee instead of what the state's paying to administer that.
Correct.
I'm just surprised that Central Iowa just didn't say, well, we'll match their price.
You would think they would be more than happy to serve their members to keep us, but apparently that wasn't the case.
Okay.
Because I'm our representative there, so.
So just for a point of clarification, we are a member and continue to be a member of the Central Iowa Council of Governments. We're receiving this service from a neighboring
That's right.
council of
That's
governments.
why my question.
Okay.
originated from. Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments? Consent?
Consent.
Thank you, Mr. Todd.
Thank you.
The next item is a request from Finance Department, and Deb Cheek is here for this request, and she's requesting approval for Budget Amendment Number 1 to accept and appropriate Juvenile Crime Prevention Council Level 2 funding.
Thank you. I'm here on behalf of the JCPC Board, and I come to you quite often with additional funds that are sent to the JCPC Board from the North Carolina Department of Public Safety for Level 2 funding. And Barium Springs or Children's Hope Alliance is an allowable use of this money, and they have been awarded an additional $150,000 grant. And I'm here to ask for you to approve Budget Amendment Number 1 so that we can appropriate those funds to Children's Hope Alliance.
Okay. Any questions? Consent?
Consent.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Deb.
Ms. Cheek. The next item is a request from Tax Administration for approval of the June refunds and releases, and there are no commissioners' names on those lists.
Consent?
Consent.
The next item is a request from Administration to designate a voting delegate to the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners Annual Conference, which is scheduled in August of 2019. And just a little bit of background on this. Commissioner McNeely was going to be the representative and was already scheduled for the conference. And since he is now our House of Representative and we have a new commissioner that is serving in that seat, the board will need to officially appoint a voting delegate to represent Iredell County at that conference.
I believe Commissioner Haupt has volunteered to attend the conference in toto, and I plan to show up for a part of it, but we'll need a voting delegate for the entire time.
So he'll get to wear Mr. McNeely's name tag?
He'll get to
wear him wear his jacket.
coats.
We will transfer the registration into the appropriate party that will be representing.
Do we need to appropriate money for the batteries?
I think we do need to require that he does wear the ceremonial bow tie. Though.
I think so, too.
Okay.
Does bow tie.
So consent on that matter?
Yes.
All right.
Consent.
All right. Good.
And then the final item is a request from the clerk to the board for approval of minutes from the meeting on June the 18th, 2019.
Okay. Consent?
Consent.
Thank you. All right. Our next items are appointments to boards and committees. If you want to review these, Beth.
Okay, we have three. Actually, I apologize. We have four different boards and committees. The first is the Central Iowa Workforce Development. We have one appointment, and Ricky Money has volunteered to serve as the organized labor representative for Iredell County. and that is a specific representation. Mitchell Community College Board of Trustees, we have one appointment and 2 individuals that have volunteered to serve. Betsy Yarborough and Kevin Donaldson have both volunteered to serve for the first time. We have reached out to Mitchell Community College, and they have said that either representative would serve Mitchell Community College well. Then the Partners Behavioral Health Board of Directors, we have 2 appointments. Jane Henson has volunteered to serve again, and then Michael Hoffman has volunteered to serve for the first time. And then Region F, Aging Advisory Committee, we have 1 appointment. Denise Bayer has volunteered to serve again, so that's a reappointment.
Okay. So we have 3 appointments, which are 1 for 1, or excuse me, 3 boards that are basically covered down by the number of applicants. Only the Mitchell College Board of Trustees. We have a decision between Betsy Yarborough and Kevin Donaldson. Any discussion on either of these applicants?
Yeah, I was going to nominate Betsy. You were going to nominate Kevin?
Well, I had kindly asked Kevin would he want to do that job, and I think at the time we didn't have any applications.
Oh, okay.
Is the only reason that I need to support Kevin there.
Certainly.
And I got a call about Kevin also.
Oh, yeah, they're both good.
Yeah, with Dr. Brewer recommending both, I don't know Betsy. I'm sure she's very qualified. But
Yeah, she's done a lot of work on the Fort Dobbs board, and now that the fort's built, I'm going to tell you, she's a go-getter. So, and is effective. But there again, you know, Kevin's a good guy too.
I was just, as far as representation, I just thought it would be nice to have somebody in Kevin's area.
Do we not have anybody from Mooresville on the Mitchell board?
I think there's a couple.
Yeah. Okay. You said.
You're talking about professional.
Yeah, yeah. But like I say, it's neither here nor there. Just I encouraged him to put in his applications. I needed support.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, you've encouraged a good person as well. So.
I think every interaction I've had with him is very professional, very sharp, analytical mind.
Well, let's hold that matter open, and we'll have an opportunity to further review the application packet. I was looking for her. Application, didn't see that. If you could just get that to each of us individually, we'll have an opportunity to review that before the 7 o'clock hour.
Okay.
And I believe unless you want to give us county manager's report preview, then
I can if you would like me to. If you want me to wait for 7 o'clock.
It's your choice.
I can go ahead and give you a little highlight.
Okay.
Tomorrow is a huge day for us because we are going to be performing the cutover for our econ department. That will be where they'll start transitioning from the current site to the new facility, the Public Safety Center. So that will start at 6 o'clock in the morning, and all hands will be on deck until the cutover is complete and successful.
You should have an outline of that whole
yes,
process.
That is what this is before you. Just to let you know, this is extensive, and there's been a lot of planning that goes into this, and they have planned it down hour by hour. So we do have a consultant that's working with us to do this, and it's going to be a painstaking process. We will have telecommunicators stationed at the current econ facility, the new econ facility, and Mooresville PD, which is our secondary, it's our backup site. So we will have telecommunicators stationed at all 3 locations, and we will have the EOC activated and open, and we will have representatives from varying disciplines there to work with us as we do this cutover. It's going to be a stressful and painstaking process, but we feel very comfortable that we have really good leadership, and it's going to be successful. And Joe Pierce will be spending a lot of time over there at our new Public Safety Center, kind of shepherding that as well and making sure that we have all hands on deck. So that's an exciting time for us tomorrow.
This is the closest thing you can get to building an airplane while it's in flight.
This is it, yes.
It will be a white-knuckle ride.
This is it. This is not one of those things where you unplug it, stick it in the car, and drive it, and then plug it back in. You cannot unplug it.
Y2K. Much ado about
Right.
nothing.
Right. We're hoping that that's the case.
Well, this level of planning and detail orientation is impressive, and I think if there's any concerns or things come up, you can consult this and see what they've been doing. But no plan survives first contact with the enemy, is what they say. So the enemy has a vote, and the enemy in this case is unknown.
That is true. But believe it or not, they've actually tried to plan for all the unknowns as well. So this will be something to watch. But
Murphy, we know that.
that's right. That will start tomorrow at 6 o'clock. So we will begin that transition tomorrow. So once we have ECOM relocated to the new Public Safety Center, we have our scheduled ribbon cutting, which will be August the 23rd at 10 o'clock in the morning, and we'll send out more information as we get closer to that date, but did want to go ahead and get that on your calendars for the ribbon cutting. We've intentionally held off on doing that because we wanted ECOM relocated there and everything running smoothly before we had that ribbon cutting. I'm doing my shameless plug for free mulch again. Free mulch at our Twin Oaks facility, and if you're in the southern end of the county in the Mooresville area, you can get it there from the town of Mooresville at the Bandit Lane facility. So please take advantage of the free mulch. It is good quality mulch, and we ask that you go between the hours of 8 and 4 because it does take some time to get it loaded. So we ask that you go between the hours of 8 and 4, but please go get some free mulch. And
Not compost.
correct, it's mulch, not compost.
Ground up limbs.
What time is our that ribbon cutting on the?
10 o'clock. 10 o'clock on August the 23rd.
I may or may not be able to be there because I'll be at the conference.
We'll take a cardboard cutout of you.
That'd be a good idea. Okay. That'll work.
And we have received a lot of questions regarding the pool. And you do not have to have a membership to the Iredell County Recreation Center in order to go to the pool. We have daily pool passes where if you just want to go for the day, we have a daily pool pass that you can get. And we have seasonal pool passes that you can buy for the entire season, and you don't have to be a member of the Recreation Center. So just to make sure that people do realize, we've been getting a lot of questions, and we're realizing that maybe we haven't done a very good job letting people know that those options are available, and you can go to the pool without having to be a member of the Recreation Center. So I did want to make sure that we highlighted that. And last but certainly not least, I have great news. Our tax office finally hit a collection rate of 99.8%.
Holy cow.
And that is amazing. We have never hit a collection rate that high, and that speaks volumes for the quality staff that we have. They have a very difficult job, and they take a lot of abuse from time to time. And for them to work so diligently and achieve a 99.8% collection rate is absolutely unheard of. And it's the highest we've had in the history of Iredell County. So we just want to make sure that they get the recognition that they are certainly due for that.
Bill Furches and his team, if their collection rate wasn't so high, the tax rate would have to be higher to compensate for it. So for the average taxpayer who actually pays their taxes, that's actually very good news because the tax rate's marginally or proportionally lower due to the efficiency of his under his leadership, his entire team.
And I did on behalf of our board as a Joint Government Task Force call him personally and congratulate him and ask him to relay our appreciation for their hard work.
As I spoke with Bill and asked him how he was able to squeeze out that additional 0.5%.
Right.
And basically they were able to, their staff has been very efficient and was able to work through collections that before took longer, and that freed up some time for them to be able to focus on smaller, more numerous tax delinquencies that really hadn't risen to the level of, obvious that we got to go after this. So they were able to, as a group, put some effort into those, and that seems to have put them over the finish line. I don't know if anybody else in the state has a better, I'd like to know.
And we can certainly research that, because I can comfortably say we are definitely one of the highest in the state, if not the highest.
Be careful how you ask the question. Somebody may come get him.
That's right. Well, I will tell you, I'm gonna tease him slightly, but he'll be okay with it. They actually hit the 99% the week he was on vacation. So we told him he needed to go on vacation every year so they can continue to hit that 99%.
That's what I told him we were going to have to add to his vacation. We get a higher percentage when he's gone.
That's right.
I think the comment we got was cheese and crackers.
Okay. We'll now move into a closed session pursuant to attorney-client issues, North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11, subsection A3.